The story you are about to hear is more than just an incident. It's a reflection of courage, injustice, and a twist no one saw coming. Imagine this. An elderly black woman, frail yet proud, is stopped on an ordinary afternoon by police officers who see her not for her dignity, but through the cruel lens of prejudice. They think she is powerless. But what they don't know is that behind her stands someone whose name commands fear and respect. Her son, Ollie, the most decorated Green Beret alive. Welcome back to Talecraft, where we bring you gripping stories that make you think, feel, and reflect. And if you are joining us for the first time, pause for a moment. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss a tale that blends raw reality with powerful lessons. Now, let me ask you something. What happens when power is abused against the wrong person? What happens when arrogance collides with a truth it cannot handle? Today's story answers that. On the surface, it seemed like just another act of police aggression, one that too many people sadly become numb to. A black woman, elderly and soft-spoken, treated harshly for no reason other than the color of her skin. The officers saw weakness in her age. They saw someone who could not resist. But what they never considered was that this woman had a strength they could not measure, a quiet resilience built from years of endurance, and most importantly, a son who carried the scars, medals, and honor of battlefields across the world. This is not just a story about one family. It's a reflection of society, of what happens when authority crosses the line, when humanity is forgotten, and when justice is twisted by bias. But it is also a story of redemption, because one phone call changed everything. The moment the elderly woman reached for her phone, the balance of power began to shift. And with each passing second, the officer's certainty turned into doubt, and doubt into fear. For the person she was calling was no ordinary man. So today I invite you to walk with me through this tale. Witness the arrogance, the cruelty, and then the shocking turn that left an entire police department speechless. Because sometimes the most powerful stories are not about revenge, but about truth forcing itself into the light. Stay with me because this is the day a racist cop arrested the wrong woman, and discovered that justice sometimes walks in through the front door. It all began on a quiet afternoon in a small town. The streets were calm, lined with oak trees that had stood for decades, silent witnesses to countless stories. An elderly woman named Miss Johnson walked slowly from the grocery store, a paper bag tucked gently in her arms. Her steps were steady but unhurried, her silver hair glinting under the sun. She had lived in this community for years, known by neighbors for her kindness and her soft voice. But on this day, none of that mattered to the men in uniform who pulled up beside her. A police cruiser stopped with a sudden screech, startling her. Two officers jumped out, their eyes fixed on her with suspicion. "Ma'am, we need to see what's in your bag," one of them barked. Confused, she clutched her groceries tighter. "It's just food," she said softly. But they didn't listen. Instead, their tone grew harsher, their voices dripping with authority. To them, she was not an elderly woman deserving respect. She was just another black face in the wrong place at the wrong time, and they intended to remind her of that. The younger officer stepped forward, snatching the bag from her hands and spilling its contents onto the pavement. Apples rolling across the street, a loaf of bread landing in the dirt. She bent down, instinctively reaching to gather her groceries, but was shoved back roughly. "Don't move," he shouted. Passers-by began to slow, their eyes widening at the sight. Some reached for their phones, whispering, "Why are they treating her like that?" But intimidation was the officer's weapon. They wanted compliance, not questions, and the elderly woman's dignity meant little in the face of their control. Miss Johnson tried to explain herself, her voice trembling. "I'm just going home. Please let me pick up my things." But her words were drowned out by the laughter of the second officer. "You people always got excuses," he sneered. That word, "you people," cut deeper than any shove or insult. It was a phrase she had heard her entire life, a reminder that to some, her worth would never be seen beyond the color of her skin. Tears welled in her eyes, not from fear, but from the heavy sting of humiliation. Without warning, the officer grabbed her wrist and twisted it behind her back. A sharp cry escaped her lips as pain shot through her arm. The other officer quickly moved in, cuffing her as if she were a criminal caught red-handed. "Resisting arrest," they muttered, though she had resisted nothing. Around them, the crowd's murmurs grew louder. "She's an old woman," someone called out. But the officers, fueled by arrogance, pressed forward, shoving her against the hood of their car. In that moment, the sight of power being abused was undeniable. As they restrained her, Miss Johnson whispered to herself, "Stay calm." She wasn't powerless, though it seemed that way. Deep inside, she carried the knowledge of who her son was, a man who had faced death countless times on battlefields, a man who had earned medals and respect through sheer courage. Her voice was barely audible when she asked, "May I make a call?" The officers scoffed, mocking her. "Who are you gonna call? Your pastor?" One sneered. But they had no idea that this call would unravel everything they thought they controlled. Her trembling fingers reached for her small phone, still in her pocket. With effort, she dialed the number she knew by heart. The crowd watched silently, sensing a shift, though none of them could predict what was coming. She lifted the phone to her ear and spoke just one sentence, "Ali, I need you." That was all it took. On the other end of the line was not just a son, but the most decorated Green Beret in modern history. And at that moment, the officers had unknowingly set into motion a chain of events they would never forget. The phone vibrated in Ali's hand, cutting through the quiet of his apartment. He knew that tone. The voice on the other end belonged to his mother, steady but tinged with urgency. "Ali, I need you," she whispered, each word carrying the weight of fear and dignity entwined. He froze, instantly sensing the gravity of the situation. Ali had trained for combat, for life-and-death decisions, yet nothing prepared him for the thought of someone harming his mother. Every instinct screamed, every muscle tensed, and a surge of focus overtook him. Within seconds, Ali was moving. He didn't run blindly, he calculated each step. His mind replayed the countless scenarios his military training had drilled into him. What had they done to his mother? Was she injured? Were there more officers involved? He visualized the scene. A courthouse, fluorescent lights, the smell of polished wood and anxiety, officers oblivious to the storm about to arrive. Every detail mattered. The moment he stepped outside, his presence alone would carry authority, courage, and the aura of a man who had seen battles most could only imagine. As he drove through the city streets, Ali's thoughts remained laser-focused. He knew how officers reacted to power, and he also knew how to command respect without violence, at least initially. He rehearsed his words, the tone he would use, the way his medals and reputation would precede him. But deep down he felt the rage simmering under the surface. His mother, frail yet proud, had been humiliated. That injustice burned hotter than any battlefield fire. The city streets blurred as adrenaline surged, every passing car a countdown toward the confrontation. Meanwhile, inside the courthouse, Miss Johnson's grip on the phone tightened. She could hear her son's steady breathing on the line, calm yet electric with anticipation. "Stay put, Mama. I'm on my way," he said, voice firm and unwavering. She drew strength from his words, her fear transforming into hope. Around her, the officers remained arrogant, unaware that the tide was about to shift. They continued with their paperwork in scorn, not realizing that the very person they underestimated was on the road, carrying not only skill but a legendary reputation earned in battle. Ali entered the building like a force of nature. His posture, tall and disciplined, radiated authority. Eyes turned, murmurs spread among courthouse staff, and the officers finally noticed him. Time seemed to slow. Ali didn't rush, didn't shout, he walked with purpose. His uniform was casual, but the medals and insignia he carried, subtle yet unmistakable, spoke volumes. In those few seconds, the officers understood they had misjudged the situation. The arrogance that fueled their abuse wavered. Fear, that subtle tremor of realization, began to creep in. He approached his mother, eyes scanning the room, noting every detail. The crowd held its breath, sensing the drama unfolding. Ali's voice was calm but firm as he addressed the officers. "You need to let her go." No threats, just authority backed by undeniable proof of his capabilities. His mother's eyes met his, gratitude shining through, relief beginning to wash away the tension. In that moment, everyone knew the balance of power had shifted. The officers had no idea who they were dealing with. The atmosphere was electric. Ali's presence alone commanded attention, respect, and fear. The officers, once bold and brash, now fumbled with paperwork, unsure how to act. The courthouse, once a place of routine and authority, had transformed into a stage for justice. Ali's calculated calmness contrasted sharply with the officers' panic, and the crowd realized they were witnessing a moment that would be remembered long after that day. Miss Johnson stood tall, proud, and protected, not by luck, but by the courage and skill of her son, the most decorated Green Beret alive. Ali's footsteps echoed through the courthouse hall, calm but deliberate. Each step radiated authority, honed from years of combat and leadership. The officers glanced up, their confident smirks fading as they recognized the figure approaching. He wasn't just another man, they could see it in his posture, his measured movements, and the quiet, lethal energy he exuded. Ali's reputation preceded him. As he drew closer, the air shifted. What had been casual indifference transformed into apprehension. This wasn't just about a mother anymore. This was about a man whose very presence demanded respect and revealed the consequences of underestimating him. The officer's initial disbelief hardened into panic. One tried to hide his medals behind his chest, but Ali's eyes had already scanned them. He didn't need to speak. His history of missions, decorations, and battlefield accomplishments were written in every line of his face, every confident step. The arrogance that had fueled their actions moments ago evaporated under his gaze. Suddenly, the room was silent except for the whisper of stunned onlookers. They had no idea they were about to witness authority in its purest, unyielding form, an authority born not from rank alone, but from skill, courage, and lived experience. Ali approached his mother, who stood tall despite the ordeal. Her eyes reflected a mixture of relief and awe, a quiet gratitude for the son who had never failed her. He placed a steady hand on her shoulder, subtly signaling protection and reassurance. The officers, frozen in place, could no longer intimidate. Ali's calmness amplified their unease. He didn't need to raise his voice or make threats. His presence alone communicated a warning louder than words. Any wrong move could have severe consequences, and the officers instinctively knew they were outmatched. With measured authority, Ali spoke. "Release her immediately," he said, voice firm yet controlled. The officers stumbled over their responses, fumbling for explanations that had suddenly lost all weight. Their previous confidence, rooted in perceived power, crumbled under the force of Ali's reputation. Courthouse staff and bystanders watched in astonishment, witnessing the shift of power from arrogance to justice. It was a quiet but decisive confrontation, the kind that leaves no room for negotiation. One wrong word from them, and Ali's skills would make them regret their actions. He slowly gestured to his mother, signaling she was free to move. The officers, swallowing hard, hesitated. They were caught between protocol and survival instincts. Ali didn't move aggressively. He simply allowed the weight of his experience and the evidence of his accomplishments to fill the space. Their indecision stretched seconds into eternity. Finally, under the intensity of his presence, the officers stepped back, releasing their hold. The courtroom exhaled collectively, tension replaced by awe. Justice, in its most personal form, had arrived not through confrontation alone, but through undeniable authority and earned respect. Ali turned to the officers, his gaze unwavering. "Let this be a lesson," he said softly, his voice calm but carrying unmistakable power. "Respect and humanity are not optional." The officers could only nod, humiliated yet relieved to avoid further escalation. Miss Johnson, still steady, smiled faintly at her son. In that moment, the entire room understood the full measure of his influence. Decades of dedication, courage under fire, and a presence that transformed fear into compliance without needing to raise a fist. As Ali escorted his mother from the courtroom, the crowd parted silently. Whispers of admiration and disbelief rippled through the room. The officers remained behind, shaken but unharmed, reminded that arrogance has consequences and that true authority is earned, not assumed. Ali's calm, deliberate actions had restored dignity to his mother and shattered the officers' illusions of control. The courtroom became a stage where justice and respect prevailed, leaving a story that would be told for years. A mother protected by her son, the most decorated Green Beret, and the moment when arrogance met its match. As Ali escorted his mother from the courthouse, a sense of calm returned to the room. The tension that had gripped everyone dissolved, replaced by awe at what had just occurred. Witnesses whispered among themselves, reflecting on the power of courage and experience. Miss Johnson's dignity, once threatened, was fully restored in front of everyone. This story wasn't just about confrontation, it was about respect, accountability, and the consequences of arrogance. It reminded all present that true authority comes from earned skill and integrity, not from a badge alone or the misuse of power. The officers, humbled and shaken, could only process what had happened. Their assumptions, rooted in bias, had led them to act recklessly. In that courtroom, they had been forced to face consequences without a single punch thrown, simply through the presence of someone they underestimated. It was a lesson in humility and accountability. Ali's calm but commanding approach demonstrated the importance of measured action and moral authority. Bystanders learned a powerful truth, that respect and courage can change outcomes dramatically, and that ignoring dignity can result in immediate and undeniable consequences. For Miss Johnson, the ordeal reinforced the bond she shared with her son. She knew that even in the most perilous situations, his training and character ensured her safety. Her pride in Ali was matched by her relief that justice had prevailed. For viewers and the audience, this story is a reminder that standing up for what is right, even when the odds seem stacked against you, matters. It's a testament to the idea that personal courage, combined with expertise, can confront injustice effectively and restore fairness in moments of crisis. This story also highlights broader lessons about society and accountability. Arrogance, prejudice, and the misuse of power can lead to humiliation or worse, but courage, preparation, and respect for others can overcome these challenges. Ali's actions were not about revenge, they were about setting things right, protecting loved ones, and demonstrating the consequences of bias. The lesson is universal: respect must be earned and given, and accountability is unavoidable when authority is misused. Courage and composure can shift the balance in ways that brute force alone never could. Before we end today's story, remember the power of sharing these lessons. Reflect on the importance of standing up against injustice, protecting loved ones, and using knowledge and skill responsibly. If this story inspired you, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to Tailcraft. Comment below with your thoughts on courage, respect, and accountability. Every voice matters in spreading awareness. Together we can amplify stories of bravery, justice, and integrity, ensuring they inspire future generations to act with honor, courage, and dignity.